I want to talk about Michael Jackson's birth chart. So if you grew up in the 90s like I did, then you probably developed a crush on Michael Jackson in some capacity. My first exposure to Michael was the Bad album, and I remember finding the cassette in this drawer that my mom had in our childhood bedroom. I opened it up and I remember seeing Bad, and I thought he was really handsome, but I was too young to know that at the time, but I was just very enamored. Anyway, so needless to say, just like everyone else on the planet, I had an obsession with Michael Jackson. I remember watching this series about his life in the 90s, so I already knew that he had a really rough upbringing. I knew the story about his father being a real intense disciplinarian. After I watched the film, it reignited my interest, which is a very, quite an understatement, in his life again, and his legacy and his music. And I was thinking to myself, while I'm doing all this research about him, because I was just like so hungry for knowledge, more knowledge about his past in his life. And I was like, damn, why am I so obsessed with him? I don't really watch movies. I haven't ever found myself like obsessed with a cultural figure the way that I have had in seasons of Michael Jackson. And so I was like, there's got to be something in his birth chart about that. I've been studying astrology for 14 years, so I have a good understanding of it. So in this video, I'm going to pull up his chart. I don't have any scripts. So I'm just going to kind of touch on a few things that stood out to me that I think are interesting, that maybe might be interesting to somebody else, so we could talk about it. I might not necessarily get through every aspect of his entire chart, just some things that I thought were really interesting. Just for your awareness, I'm looking at a whole sign Western tropical chart. Michael Jackson was born on August 29th, 1958 at 7:33 p.m. in Gary, Indiana. And he is a Virgo sun with a Pisces rising and a Pisces moon. He has a stellium of 3 planets in the 6th house of Leo in his natal chart, and those planets are Venus, Mercury, and Uranus. He's got the north node in the 8th house of Libra and the south node in the 2nd house of Aries. He also has his natal Mars in the 3rd house of Taurus. First thing I want to point out is his chart. It's interesting because I guess it's kind of a balance, but it is loaded with trines. I don't know how to say that. I don't know what the official way of pronouncing that is. I've always read it as trines. I've heard people pronounce it as trines. I think trines sounds better, so I'm going to go with that. If you don't know what a trine is, I don't even know why you're watching this video. This video is not going to be a full-on, in-depth explanation of the various characteristics of qualities of a natal chart, but if you want that, then I encourage you to let me know in the comments, because I could do that too. I am a teacher. I can teach. His natal chart is loaded with trines and sextiles, but mostly trines, a ton of trines. And those trines are symbolic of or indicative of natural capability, natural talents. Trines can make us lazy. They can be sort of areas of our life where we're content to rest in our laurels because we're able to achieve certain things or express those gifts with ease, where other people would have to try really hard. Those are things that come to us naturally. So the risk with trines is that if they're not met with hard work, they're just wasted talent. But he also does have a number of squares and oppositions. The squares and the oppositions, or otherwise contentious angles, point to hard work and friction, which is important to make manifest all the natural capabilities in his chart. And, if you know anything about his life, you know that he was, working really hard, was forced to work very hard from a very young age. One of the things that I really want to touch on, because I think I've watched other I've watched other astrologers read Michael Jackson's natal chart, and there's discussion of his stellium in the 6th house of Leo, and I definitely want to talk about that because that's fascinating and very much expressive of kind of his work ethic and kingly status. But there are 2 areas of his natal chart that I find really interesting that I can't unsee now that I see them. And it's the following. Let's begin by saying the reason why I wanted to look up his natal chart was because I needed to know where the obsession element comes from. Now, like what I'm talking about is, if you're not familiar also with, if you weren't raised by Michael Jackson and you weren't kind of there when the tabloid press was going absolutely off about him and seeing on TV people fainting on stage, Michael Jackson's level of fame was unique in that it sparked pandemonium. There aren't any modern day celebrities that excite the same level of mania, I guess, that Michael Jackson had. So there's something unique about his particular impact where he could just stand on a stage and people would faint just from looking at him. That's very unique to him. He's able to magnetize people to him on such an emotional level too. Yeah, he has a high level of emotional impact on people. And that's something that I was looking for in his chart. I was joking around with my friends. I'm like, I'm getting my Michael Jackson PhD right now. Anyway, so I was looking for all that stuff in his chart. First thing I want to talk about is his Pisces rising. So Michael Jackson is a Pisces rising, but he's also a Pisces moon, which means that he has his moon in the first house. Pisces is a water sign. And the moon rules the sign of Cancer, which is also a water sign. And the moon is in his first house of self and how people perceive him. If I had looked at this without knowing the persona, I would immediately interpret it as a very emotional person, someone who's extremely intuitive, someone who's very sensitive, someone who's very in touch with, what do I want to say? Kind of like the spiritual realm. Pisces being the final sign in the zodiac is this nebulous, nondescript, sort of mush of all matter, reducing itself to its original boundaryless form before it takes on a tangible, visceral, material manifestation back in Aries. So I'm just discussing the zodiacal wheel. Starts with Aries and it ends with Pisces. And the zodiac wheel is symbolic of a life cycle. Well, it's symbolic of several cycles, one of them being a life cycle, and Aries is birth. So Aries being the first sign of the zodiac, taking place in the spring, or the sun is in the constellation Aries in the spring, during the spring equinox. It represents birth and new life. But Pisces being the sign right before that, it's not death. It's more like the cosmic goo, so to speak, before birth. I mean, you can kind of think of it as like the womb, all of that mush, when everything is sort of mixed together and things are they haven't fully formed yet. You know what I mean? All of that bodily fluid, if you want to think of it in sort of biological terms, but I also think of it as like literally smoke or fog, or any sort of spiritual, nondescript, sort of cloudy nebulousness. Okay. Anyway, so that's my description of Pisces. That's how I see Pisces when I think of the archetype in my mind. And therefore it has easy contact, the easiest contact with the spiritual realm. Being that it's also the final sign of the zodiac, it also has the wisdom of all the signs that precede it. I think it was Barry Gordy who said that when he met Michael, it was like he was an old man, an old soul in like a little kid's body. And I think that would be apt. It might not have been Barry Gordy who said that, but I want to say it was definitely among the folks in the industry who discovered him when he was a child. That's very Piscean. There's a lot of wisdom within Piscean personalities or archetypes. This alone would indicate the chart of a very sensitive person, but then you layer on top of that the moon is in the first house, which is where we present ourselves to the world. So I would layer further and say that there's an exponent at the end of his sensitivity. Looks like somebody who wears their heart on their sleeve, in my opinion. And the fact that his moon and his ascendant are in the same sign. They're both in Pisces. To me, that reads like a what you see is what you get personality. What complicates that, however, is that because Pisces is a very nebulous, boundaryless sort of energy, it's a sign that's very easy to project onto. Pisces as an archetype lacks form, if you will. And there is a quality with Piscean energy that doesn't seem to know or understand how to draw boundaries and draw lines. And we see this prevalent in Michael Jackson's life, where he repeatedly seems to have sort of blurred lines in relationships where the public would like to see more separation for their own comfort and for their own sense of propriety. The child molestation allegations probably come to mind for all of us immediately, but I also think of his relationship with Diana Ross, and I'm sure these are not the only two examples, but she was 14 years older than him and was something of a mother figure when he was young, and then when he got older, he was in love with her, apparently, and he wrote Remember the Time about her. So, here's a person here's a relationship where they're very good friends, and he sees her as a mentor, but he also sees her as a mother, but he also sees her as a lover, but he also sees her as a sister. And so there's not really a clear, line between all of those different roles. And I think people have a hard time accepting that with him or finding that that's appropriate, in terms of how he navigates his relationships with others. I think it also amplifies the mystery around him because people can't quite figure him out. And I think, you might consider Pisces is also pretty mysterious. Think about it. No one's ever been to the bottom of the ocean. It's too profound. It's too deep. So Pisces is also, it's very It's interesting. I would say that I would argue that it's a relatable sign, but insofar as you can see yourself in it, because it's easy to project onto Pisces because it's like a reflection. And Pisces also, in that, because it lacks boundaries, can absorb sort of can identify very deeply with others and sometimes takes on other people's emotions and things as their own. I'm not saying he did that. I'm just saying like pure Piscean archetypal energy, absent of any other influences, which doesn't exist, by the way. So just this is a thought exercise. So it is relatable insofar as you can see yourself like a reflection in a mirror or in the surface of water in Pisces, but it's also mysterious in that there is a depth there that one can't ever fully reach. I don't remember what year it was. I want to say it was 2003. He came out with a response documentary to address the child molestation allegations. He made himself look bad to the press in that film because he's there holding Gavin. What is that kid's name? Gavin Arvizo's hands very tightly. And I don't know how old Gavin Arvizo was at the time. Maybe he was 13 or something like that. He was a child and Michael's a grown man. So the public was just thought that his image was worsened by this attempt to, rid himself of the defamation against him. Again, when we witness these things, when we watch that documentary and we understand that he was openly admitting to, sleeping in the same bedroom with children that were not his family. Again, that's another example of boundarylessness, his Piscean, this heavy influence of Piscean energy. So Pisces rising, intensely creative, in touch with the spiritual realm, like able to talk to God, extremely sensitive, wears his heart on his sleeve, doesn't have a good understanding of normal boundaries. But I want to take it further in discussing his appearance. So Pisces is represented or symbolized in astrology by a fish. And I can't get over this. And it also rules the feet, funnily enough, because every zodiac sign of the 12 rules an area of the body, and it starts with Aries, which is the head. And then, of course, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and Pisces being the last rules the feet. So going top to bottom, Pisces rules the feet. I mean, I just think it's fascinating because, first of all, not only was Michael Jackson, it doesn't even need to be said, he was a prolific dancer. He was a prolific dancer, period. But on top of that, there was also emphasis on the feet. I mean, he would go out of his way during music video shots to be sure that the cameraman, we also saw this in the film, but it's you can see it across his music video catalog. There are always shots of his feet, so he wants to make sure that the feet are seen. He also wears the sparkly socks to emphasize the feet. I mean, there are a lot of elements in his costume and wardrobe that are intended to emphasize or draw the eye to certain areas of the body. Even during the bad era, when he would wear those white bandages on his fingertips, to help, it was kind of like dancing punctuation marks or whatever with his fingertips. But in any case, yes, so Pisces ruling the feet is extremely appropriate for his sort of prolific dance capability and his interest in showing the feet and footwork, and obviously his moonwalk and everything else. But also his face, I mean, his eyes. He's known for having extremely soulful eyes. If you look at a picture of him, it's kind of hard to look away. He has a very deep, beautiful gaze. Usually Pisces will have beautiful eyes, will have very deep, beautiful, soulful eyes. But he also, as he progressed throughout his life, to me, looked more and more like a fish when I think about his nose getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until at the end of his life. I mean, there was almost just only nothing but two nostrils there, respectfully. Big smile, sort of that the teeth are, the fish have like that big slit of a mouth with like the pointy teeth or whatever. He didn't have pointy teeth, but he had like that sort of numerous, I don't know, like the big eyes and the skinny nose and then the wide mouth. It was giving very much a fish-like appearance to me. And none of this is meant to be. I think Michael Jackson is an extremely handsome man for a variety of reasons. He had an extraordinary sense of style, beautiful eyes, but I just do think that it's not a coincidence that he has so much Piscean influence on his ascendant and he looked like a fish, in my opinion. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to touch on, and this video probably is already so long, so I'll have to do a part 2. If you want to hear part 2, let me know in the comments so I can do another one, but I'm going to end this video after this second observation, and it is this. So remember when I told you at the start of the video that I was curious about the obsessive element that he was able to elicit in his fans, and I think that's exemplified in the fact that his natal sun in Virgo, by the way, which is opposite his ascendant within a 4-degree orb, is conjunct Pluto, natal Pluto, also in Virgo at 2 degrees, only 4 degrees away from one another. Pluto rules, among other things, anything forbidden. mystery, secrets, obsession, envy, darkness, death, debt, the end of seasons, things like that. And his natal sun is conjoined with this planet that rules all of these dark things. So, folks have observed his obsessive work ethic, and he has a Virgo sun, and Virgo is very much a workhorse energy, similar to Capricorn, but in a way where it's more about details and perfectionism. So you combine that with this Plutonian sort of obsessive energy, and you get someone who executes on their work and their sense of perfectionism in an obsessive way. I also think that this has to do with the way that other people are receiving his persona. He's also he elicits quite an emotional response from the public. People cry and faint and just are really moved by him. And I think that the Pluto conjunction with the natal sun is an area where we can see that expressed in the natal chart. In addition to the fact that he has all of this Piscean energy up front. I mean, there's also the element of him being really interested in horror and sort of these darker themes in some of his art and his music. We all know Thriller, of course. In 1997, when he released Blood on the Dance Floor, which was kind of more of an experimental record, I think he made that music video called Ghosts. It was a music video for Ghosts, I believe. Again, we're looking at more horror influences. And there was also this vampiric quality about his appearance as well, in addition to the fact that he kind of was looking more, there was a fish resemblance that I was getting, which is, harks back to his Piscean ascendant. But in addition to that, he did take on more and more of a vampiric presentation later in his life as well, with that high contrast, super pale skin, the long, dark, wet, glossy hair, and, the clothing that kind of hangs from the body, and that very sort of slight physique very much gives that Plutonian sort of spooky thriller energy. We didn't even talk about his natal stellium in the sign of Leo in the 6th house. So if you want to hear more about Michael Jackson's natal chart, then let me know in the comments and I'll make another video. And if you liked this video, comment, share, subscribe, watch another one. Let me know what you thought. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. And until the next one, I'll see you. Bye.